Today we are going to discuss the outlook of the global trading system given the current and recent economic and financial turmoil. We will have a discussion and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience, and including our online audience, both in person and online. One of the largest kind of gross impact that we can measure in globalization is the enormous expansion in the share of global product which is traded across borders. It's something we can measure. In 1990, 18% of everything produced in the world was traded across borders. By 2006, it was nearly 30%. We have never seen either such high levels nor such rapid increases in the share of in global trade at any time in the past. Moreover, the character of that trade has also changed over this period, both in the kinds of goods which a country like the United States trades, has moved up increasingly intellectual IP intensive, we might say, or high-end or high-technology goods. We have large new actors in this system. In 1990, China and India were both negligible participants in global trade. Really, they virtually didn't. Virtually didn't register, and they certainly didn't register with respect to trade with Europe and the United States. Today, as everyone knows, they are major actors in global trade, particularly China. So a great deal has changed. One of the consequences of this vast expansion of the global trading system is that a global recession has an enormous impact on trade. And so we saw, in fact, that as this crisis worsened, we were seeing declines in trade that rivaled the declines we saw after Smoot-Hawley was passed in the 1930s. That is, this enormous expansion of globalization gets you the effects of protectionism without actual protection in this precipitous drop in global trade. So the first question that I thought we would discuss is, what do we see as the potential impact of this crisis on the global trading system? What have we learned, and how should we rethink the way we approach trade questions given this new trade landscape?
That's a very good question, Robert. And incidentally, thanks for all the overly generous remarks you made about me. I hope I managed to live up to even a fraction of what you said. Certainly, trade has, in the last 20, 30 years, practically everywhere, expanded relative to GNP in virtually every country. Even India and China, as you pointed out, which were laggards, which were sort of giants which were supposed to wake up after the war, but continued snoring until about late 1980s because of very bad inward-looking policies and a variety of associated failures in economic policy making. They've finally woken up, and part of their waking up has been considerable outward orientation, even more so on the part of China than India. And you see that they too have now wound up being major players in world trade, and they will. Now, I think at the same time, what has happened, and one reason why trade has expanded very rapidly is not just that we have been dismantling trade barriers, which we have. So with any given set of fundamentals, if you lower trade barriers, you're going to get more trade, obviously, relative to GNP. There'll be a multiplier effect. But it's not just the expansion or the reduction of trade barriers, but we've also seen internationalization of production in a massive way, what are called supply chain effects. And remember, the trade to GNP, which is what we were talking about, divides trade, which is a gross value, by GNP, which is value added. So if the same item goes, it's like a car, goes to you, you put on a battery in your country, then it goes to another country where you put on, a bumper, another place where you put on windshield wipers. Each time the components, the bulk of the car is being counted as trade, right, when it goes from one country to another. But the actual value added, the word GNP, is not really going up that much. Therefore, you would expect a very substantial disproportionate effect. Now, this is not simply a statistical illusion. It does reflect, in fact, good economics. I mean, people are doing this because it adds value to what they're doing. And I think this is extremely important. Actually, later on, we might discuss how bilateral agreements are being, are multiplying now, and when we discuss Doha and the multilateral system. Because under the bilateral system, I have to decide which product is coming from where before I can give you a preferential treatment. Now, at a time when people are bringing in things from everywhere, like the bionic man, it's just his brain which has not been replaced. When everything consists of parts from everywhere, it is a mug's game to try and say, look, I'll give you a better terms than someone else. And this is why people are now more into multilateral trading system than into the bilaterals. So I think that has been part of it. The reason also why I think trade, in reverse, of course, you would see, therefore, it's just as trade was expanding rapidly relative to income, you would expect in the downturn the thing to fall disproportionately. But one additional reason is that this is not just a macroeconomic crisis, it's also a financial crisis. It's a double crisis, it's interactive. So the decline of trade credits also has been an important factor. So I would say that accounts for the very substantial downturn. It's not that protectionism is broken out. We'll have to be discussing that. Because I don't think there's much evidence of protectionism having broken out. I mean, we naturally make a lot of noise about it. Because if we don't, the politicians will take the easy way out. So like if you fear a tsunami coming, you better start screaming like hell, even though the wind is just blowing more roughly. And the tsunami is still far away. And I think what one additional reason why protectionism has not been that bad so far and is precisely because of the internationalization of the world economy. Today, you take Buy America provisions, the president had to worry about it, but the president has been rather lukewarm about going and batting for trade for a variety of reasons. But the people who went to him were, in fact, the manufacturing and other lobbies, because today everybody has world markets. In every state in this country, there are firms which are actually into trade. So Boeing can go, and I'm told did go to the president and to his advisors and said, if you do something like this, India can easily turn around and take some orders on Boeing to Airbus. GE can lose the 2 nuclear reactors which the Indians have set aside for us Americans, and they can take them to France and to Russia. Caterpillar would lose. These are just the prominent examples of what can happen. So that has been a stabilizer, I think, to some extent in our leadership, no matter how pushed by the recession into import competing measures, into being a little more moderate. And therefore, protectionism has been held at bay by the nature of the global economy today.
This globalization, as you point out, reflects global production systems.
Right.
And the global production systems have been driven by vast increases in foreign direct investment.
Right.
Is there any evidence, and this is not something we discussed before, just the question just occurred to me as you were speaking, Is there any evidence that the financial crisis is having any significant effect on flows of foreign direct investment?
Nothing very dramatic, I would say, no. Because remember, it's been on about 3 years at maximum, 2 years of intensity. We're already showing green shoots. So I think that's one reason. And the other reason, of course, is that while, as you pointed out earlier, now everybody's in the same boat. But in the old days, when the U.S. went down, we used to say that when the U.S. has a cold, the rest of the world gets influenza or pneumonia. Well, today, when we get a cold, we have India and China, which are spending from the reserves and which are holding up the world economy. Actually, we have a stabilizing mechanism rather than a mechanism where we bring them down. They are actually helping shore us up. And so I think that has been a dramatic change, and I think this is what makes many people feel that maybe these two countries, which have really emerged finally as substantial powers, China a bit more so, that they will begin to play a major role, and their views about how to run the world economy and the global system is going to play increasingly greater roles. Now, Brazil is in that sort of ballpark, more or less, and there's no other country that, I mean, Russia is still in deep, deep trouble.
Right.
We all know that. I mean, Russia has the same problem as India had, which is of having such bad policies for such a long time that, we in India are also in the middle of still cleaning up. I mean, it's not like we've gone over to a new model completely. I mean, it's like cleaning up after a tsunami. Your job is almost never done. And you go to Russia, which I did, 3 months ago for the St. Petersburg Forum, and I could not get my traveler's checks cashed anywhere and I was trying to get them into basically the rubles, which anybody who lacks foreign exchange should be jumping at. We went through 25 banks. None of them would ever do it because they said we would have to consult Moscow and it will take about 6 weeks and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean. They're very different from what they were, but they're still far away from where we are. And so I think this is why I would not put Russia quite in the same league, but Brazil certainly is moving up.
Well, the largest player in Latin America, but still
small.
Still very
Still small. And India,
small
too,
player.
I think it'll be another 15, 20 years before it surmounts it. But China is very much there. This is why the president talks of G2 and so on, which is a bit of an exaggeration to some extent. But I think it's certainly China's views do matter. And it's largely because they're holding a whole lot of treasuries, and this scares the pants off the Americans.